a mentor in your actual area. Okay. Okay, I'm just taking a look at uh, the chat. I'm going to now turn it over to Jim King. He's the founder of Wheaton Website Services, provides hosting, website design, and development across the globe. And he's got a lot of experience with online um, businesses, e-commerce, SEO. So he's here to share his expertise with us about tips when we're outsourcing our web development. Jim, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. I'm just moving this little bar out of my way and I will get started. So thank you all for attending this evening. I have a quick little shout out to Score. I've used Score for probably 25 years. One of the first businesses I started with their help. So I'm a big fan and enjoy doing these little webinars to give back as best I can. There we go. So as I mentioned, I attended many of these myself, and when I show up, I usually go, well, who's this guy or gal talking to me, and why are they here? What do they know? So just a real quick background. I spent about 16 years selling specialty medical products for a couple of companies out of college. And during that time, I always thought to myself, I'd rather, sell for myself than these big companies. And I never knew what that was going to be. But when in 97, my wife and I had our first and only son, and we went to Kinko's, we bought some cardstock, came home, printed up his birth announcements, and mailed those out to our friends and family. And that was the first spark for me. 3 months later, I had gone back to Kinko's and bought up all the different cardstocks they had, put them in a little 3-ring binder, and sold those to friends and family. And did that for about a year or two, built a website in 98, and did it evenings and weekends. It was a fun little hobby for me to build a website, to learn how to build a website, and to run a business. And that was probably my first interaction with Score back in 98. Did that for, when I do the math in my head here, about 7 years. Friends and family would ask, hey, you going to do that full time? I said, it's crazy. Who's going to do invitations full time? But by 2005, I was actually on probation with Kimberly Clark because I wasn't making my sales number because I was spending too much time on my own business. And so at that point, I had to make a decision. What am I going to do? Go back, put my business to the side, and work, harder for Kimberly Clark, or vice versa. And as you all can probably guess, I resigned from Kimberly Clark and have been happily self-employed since 2005. Ran those businesses for a couple of years. That invitation business turned into an invitation and a photo gift business. They each had separate websites. And when the economy tanked in 2008 to 2010, those businesses also started to tail off. And I knew they weren't going to last much longer. So I did a little self-evaluation going, what skill sets do I have? What do I do next? And I had been running those two businesses on an e-commerce platform for several years. And when doing a little research, found there was several 100,000 other companies running that same platform to run their e-commerce businesses. So I said, wonder if they'll pay me to help them run their business as I had been running mine. And that's how Wheaton Website Services started in 2010. We've expanded out to some other platforms, but are primarily e-commerce. We have, I don't know, 25% of our clients are not e-commerce, but e-commerce is still kind of our core business because that was my background. So I've been there, done that, done doing this for 20, I don't know, so almost 30 years, 28 years, something like that, and enjoy doing it. So that's a little bit about who I am. And my mouse, there we go, get back over here. Here we go. So today we're going to cover a couple of things, and I got to move this thing out of the way. There we go. We're going to talk about how to, if you're going and building a new website or rebuilding an existing website, how do you go through and build a plan that's going to work and have a successful outcome? So it's start with clearly defining your needs. What's the desired outcome? What is it that you want? When somebody says, I want to build a website, that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So that's a great place to start, but that just begins the questions. We're talking about branding and content. If you're going to build a website, you're going to need some branding done. You're going to need some content to put on the website. Websites have SEO, and there'll be some marketing involved. So how does that play into defining your needs? We're going to talk about how to find candidates. You look locally, nationally, internationally. What kind of tips or what do you think about during the interview process after you shortlisted your list of candidates? And then you kind of get the rubber meets the road, the building and review. What's the build process look like? How do you partner with the vendor you choose to be sure the website is built successfully? Did all this work, make sure it's built the right way, and review and launch. I mean, it's all done. Now, how do you get this thing to go live with the final version? So we do a quick little poll. I'm kind of curious to see who's here. It'll help me with some of the examples I use or some of the talking points. But if you can do just a quick, are you in business yet? Are you just kind of figuring out what you're doing? Are you in business but don't have a website yet? Or in business and have a website? So I'll take just a moment or two here, let you all chime in, and we'll see where things shake out. I'll mention while we're waiting. So yes, throw some questions in the chat. Barbara's going to do a great job of kind of keep an eye on that. I can't really watch that and do the presentation at the same time. So answer them as best I can as we go along. We'll have time at the end, I think, I hope, as well, and take some questions there. But do feel free to drop those questions in. I'll try and answer as best we can as we go along.
Okay, so we have 20 people on the call and we have only 10 answers, or there's got to be more answers out there. So I'm gonna give you 5 more seconds to try to participate in this poll. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we got one more participant. Thank you.
That needs attention. Excellent. Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing. So a lot of people in business websites, so great. So I'm going to assume for most of those people that you're probably either looking to maybe redesign that site at some point, which is true. A website is entirely a work in progress. It is never done, even though once you've built it, you say it's done. There's changes and rebuilds along the way, so lots of things to go along with that. Let's see. The poll's still up on my screen. Can I close that out, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm just should be gone now.
Okay.
Gone?
Nope.
Hmm.
There it is now. I clicked it. It's gone.
Okay.
Okay. So defining your needs. It's a whole lot of questions. We're going to go through each of these, but what's the goal for the website? Why do you have one? What's the purpose of having it? It'll be a key to the entire rest of the presentation and the rest of your build. Will it be a custom, a pre-built, or DIY theme? What does that mean? And what are the pluses and minuses? Do you have your brand defined? You're going to tell a story with your website. Got to have a brand story to tell. With the brand comes the content, text, images, videos that fill out that story. If it's an e-commerce site, as I talked about my background, lots of additional questions. It does everything a regular website does, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. So a whole lot of questions that go along with that on top of the regular questions. What are your SEO expectations? Yes, we all want SEO done. We want to rank well, but what does that mean? How are you going to market the site? That will go into some of the questions you have for yourself, some of the questions you have for the vendor, and how the site is built to be sure that those expectations or needs are met in the final website. So I mentioned, what's the goal? What role? So you have a business plan. Your business has a goal. And you have lots of pieces in that business. You have finance and marketing and all these things. But the website's one of those pieces of your business. What's the role that the website plays in your business? It's important to understand it. I love analogies, and I often use a house analogy for some reason. The goal of your website is the foundation for your house. If you don't have that built well, the rest does not matter. You can bring in the best builder in the world, but if your foundation is full of cracks and it's the wrong size and shape, he can't build you or she can't build you the house you want. So think about it. Why do you have the website? What is it that it's supposed to do for you? I'll use e-commerce as an example a lot because it's a really simple example that most people can understand. If it's an e-commerce website, the goal is to sell stuff. That's the goal. You'll do lots of other stuff on the website, but at the end of the day, you want people to buy stuff. E-commerce. There's lots of other goals though. It might be simply to be found. If you're a plumber in Wheaton, you may just want people who are in the Wheaton area to find you when they want plumbing services. That's a perfectly good goal. There's lots of good goals. You just have to define what it is for you. Simple contact us form. For our website, that's essentially our purpose. We do have some things for sale on the website, but that's not the reason for our website is to be found. And I want you to fill out the contact form and say, hey, I want to have a conversation about my website. That's my goal for my website. Could be schedule an appointment. If you're a therapist or a counselor, you want people to come to your website, use your calendar to schedule a time with you. That could be the goal. Doesn't really matter what it is, but you do need to clearly define and understand what that goal is for your site. When talking with prospective clients, sometimes we get into this conversation about why do you have the website. And the one thing that is not a good answer is when they say to me, you're the expert, do whatever you want. You know what you're doing. And yes, we know what we're doing when we're building a website, but we're not building a website. We're telling your story. And you know your story better than anybody. I love this little quote. I forget where I saw it the first time. But you know your business better than anybody. Don't let anybody tell your story. Yes, help your vendor, your website vendor, tell your story and build your site. But it's your website. You've got to be in control of the goal and help them understand the story that they're trying to tell. And speaking of goals, again, I love quotes and I don't know who said it, but if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. If you can't measure something, how can you possibly improve upon it or know if you're achieving the goal? So whatever your goal is, find a way to measure it. If it's just website traffic, which is fine, find a way to measure it. How many people are coming to the website and measure how many people that is. Watch that number over time. If it's traffic, I'll step back, take a step back. So it could be contact form submissions. For us, that's what we watch. How many people submitted the contact form? These are all great things to measure that relate to your goal. And if it's your first website, it may be one of those simple questions. How many people came to the website? How many people filled out the contact form? If it's a second version of website, or you really want to be a little more specific in tracking your goal, take those questions one step further. So you're measuring website traffic. Great. How many people came from the email that you sent out last month? How many people came from the Facebook ad? You can dive pretty deep into the analytics to answer some really specific questions. And that's one. So the contact form submissions, the other thing to look at is, okay, we got 25 submissions last month. Great. How many people came and saw the contact form page? Did 25 people see the page and all 25 filled it out? Or did 500 people see it and only 25 filled it out? You use that number to go look at the form. If it's a low number, is the form too long and complicated? Is there a technical issue with the form? It begs some questions. So whatever your goal is, just be sure you have a way to measure. You can always dive deeper, but start with something simple if that's where you are, and you can get more complicated down the road. Talk about the brand story. Your website is there to tell you the story of your company. This is what we do. This is why we do it. This is what we want you to do. So if you haven't defined your brand story, it's going to be really hard to tell that story. I had a client or a prospect, this was years and years ago. I asked him, I said, why do you want a website? He said, well, somebody told me I had to have one. Well, the conversation kind of ended there. There's no goal, there's no motivation. He didn't believe that he needed or wanted a website. Somebody told him he should. So how do you build that? You can't. So have your story. We're going to talk a little bit about these to understand what they are. I'll tell you though, when I created the brand story for my company, I did it through a SCORE webinar and with the help of a SCORE counselor to figure out, because I had never done one before. We did this about 3 years ago. But the brand pillars are, what are the core beliefs of your company? What are you at your core? The brand strategy, who's your target customer? Who are you trying to reach? And the brand position statement. What makes you different? Why are you better or different, better and different than any of your competitors? The brand pillars, as I just said, are the qualities that your company believes in. There are a whole bunch. This is a very short list, and you can't be all of them. 3, 4, 5 is probably the only ones that are realistic. You think of UPS and you think of the brown truck, you think of the friendly delivery guy, you think on-time delivery, you maybe think local. A couple of things come to mind for you when you think UPS. And so you think that because one, they spend, millions or billions of dollars building out their brand, but they also live it. That's who they are. You build that perception. I built my perception of them through interaction, not because I read their brand pillars someplace. So as you think about your company, what are the things that are core to the company, that these are the things that we are non-negotiable of, we will always be these things? The brand position, sometimes called an elevator pitch or the selling proposition, it should answer what you do, who you do it for, and why you're the best choice. And I put it up here just as an example. I find sometimes examples are better than describing what I'm trying to say. So our brand position statement for small and medium-sized e-commerce businesses and businesses with websites vital to their success, Wheaton Website Services provides technical expertise, I can read it, and responsive support, allowing your website to run flawlessly. So that's what we do. And at the end of the statement, the response that I'm hoping from you is, oh, I get what they do. You may not need it, you may not believe it, you may not whatever, but you understand it. And that's the only point. You go, okay, I know what they do. If you read it to someone, they go, well, what do you mean? Or they ask a question, it probably needs tweaked again. And this went through 6 or 8 versions until we got down to this one. But it's this quick little statement that says who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And so I want to just take a brief pause and see if there's any questions about stuff so far. I know we haven't got into the building and we're going to, but the point of covering these things first is if you don't know your story, haven't defined your story, you can't possibly build out your website. The website is the extension of your story. So I just got a quick second and see if there's any questions you want to pop in the chat. Feel free to pop them in as they come up. We'll keep going. So you've defined your brand. You got to create content. So you know who you are, what you do, and why you do it. There's got to be something on the website, text, images, and video. That's what goes on the website. And this can be something that you create internally. You partner with another company. You get together with a score counselor. But you got to figure out, what's your content. And one of the key tools to doing this is what are called personas. It's not a target market. A target market is a list of demographics that describe the type of people that might be your ideal customers. But a persona is something different. And a persona is one specific fictional person that is your ideal customer. And there's a slide coming up here in a second, but the logic that I use with a persona is if I'm going to write content, I'm going to write an email, then the persona is the person that I'm writing to. You can't write to demographics. You can't write to 35 to 45-year-old women who live in the suburbs. You can't have a conversation with that, but you can have a conversation with a persona. And so it's the next slide up, I think it is. But the demographic, as I just kind of said, women 35 to 45, it's a demographic. But a persona is Evelyn. Evelyn's a persona. She's a made-up person, 39-year-old engineer living in Austin. You can read the rest of the slide here. But she's a person. So as you create your content and you find your pictures and you write your videos and you shoot your videos, you think of Evelyn. Would Evelyn like this? Is this how the words that Evelyn uses? Would she understand what we're saying to her? You can do that with a persona. There's a tool, and here's the one I was thinking of. Lemlist is there's a website that does a free persona creation tool. And this was created, I gave them my website and they created this persona. And I don't expect you to read this all. It'll be in the slides later if you want to go through and read it. The point in sharing it was, I got this picture that I can use when I think of now, we've renamed her Jane. But it talks about her pain points and her metrics and what words does she use and how does she think. These are all things that help create the content because they're geared towards a person rather than a demographic. So when you create the content, first create the persona and then create the content geared to that persona that you have. And you could have multiple. You're not going to have a dozen, but you might have 2 or 3, perfectly normal. So for SEO expectations, we sometimes get calls and emails from clients. Hey, can you do the SEO for my website? Well, no, it's not. Doesn't work that way. SEO is not the frosting on the cake that you put on at the end. It's not the writing happy birthday. It's part of the site build. It's part of the content build. SEO it's the text on the pages. It's the pictures that you pick. It's the video that you create and the dialogue in the video. So you're creating the content. You have to do that with the SEO in mind. Everything that you're going to create is done with that. So understand what your expectations are so that can be built into the site from day one. The only way to do it at the end is really to rebuild most of the content. You got to rewrite the text, maybe find some new pictures. It is not the way you want to do SEO. Is oh crap, I forgot. Let's do the SEO today. It doesn't work. And all of what I've kind of been saying here is really, this phrase design with the end in mind. You have this website that you're thinking of, this conceptual website. What we're talking about tonight is all the things that go into making that a reality. And so some of the pieces of that are talk to the internal teams. There are people that maybe don't have a direct need or influence on the website, but in some way they touch it with, if they're in their position. Talk with them, get their inputs. Hey, I know we're building a new website. I'd love it if it did this, or I need this to come out of it. Somebody fills out the contact form, I have to have their email address, whatever it may be, probably a bad example. But there are pieces that people will need out of the website. Be sure they're included early on so it gets baked into the scope of work. Talk to colleagues, anybody who has a website. If you work with people, you have a neighbor who has a website, talk with them. How did it go? What did you forget? In hindsight, what would you do differently? Who did you use? Ask them. most people, I think, are happy to share their experience so that other people can benefit from it. It's kind of the whole point of SCORE. Um, Other piecing are the things that should be created separate from the website. If you need a brand created, well, do that first. That's got to be done first. So maybe that becomes a project that you do before the build the website. If you need to find or create content, probably done outside of the project. It could be part of it, but it may be done externally. So figure out what has to happen first before you can get into this process of building the site.
We have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Richard, you want to come off mute?
Yes, thank you, Barbara. Jim, two questions for you. One is AI. How is that affecting SEO these days? And I know that's really new. But I used to hear about keywords that were really important. And now they're saying, well, maybe keywords, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, but AI is really turning this around. Any update or intelligence on that we should be concerned, or is it just too new?
That is a question we could spend about the next 4 hours talking about. I had a business meeting this morning. We talked about AI. The last 3 meetings I've had, it's come up in conversation. It does matter. It's not going away. It's not too soon. What I like is let me come back to it at the end. It's not specifically relevant to the build process. It does affect SEO. It will affect marketing in a huge way. But let me come back to that at the end. It's a great question. Let me come
Okay,
back to it at the end if I can. Did you have a second question, or can we
I
come back to that?
do. So my business, I'm just starting out, is a handyman business, and I named it Herman Services
Mhm.
for whatever reason. Now, when I went to look for a URL, hermanservices.com is used. It's
Mhm.
not an active website right now, but it's not available. So at the time, I chose hermanservices.net. Okay.
Mhm.
So is that okay? Is that counterproductive? Is that, it doesn't matter. There's so many suffixes or whatever, yeah, out there. I don't know what to do.
Yeah, there are probably hundreds of what they're called top level domains. The dot something, the dot com, the dot org, the dot net. Those are top level domains. There used to be three: the dot net, dot net, dot com, and dot org, and now there are hundreds, if not thousands. I think for businesses, there are some that don't make any sense. They're kind of funny and goofy, and you shouldn't be used for businesses. The dot net, the dot org, the dot com, I think are all great. Dot org certainly more for nonprofits. But my personal opinion is it doesn't make much difference. I mean, you think about when you search online or you go someplace, how many times do you type in the URL? You're used to doing a search. And do you even look at the .com, the .net, or the .org? I know I generally don't. I do, but it's sometimes only because it's a professional. I'm curious. I look at the code sometimes and these sort of things. But no, I think you're fine with that. It doesn't make much of it. Technically, it makes almost no difference at all. As long as you're using something that's fairly normal. There's .pro, there's .shop. All of those are great. The weird ones you want to stay away from a business or for a business. All right, so
Thank
we'll
you.
save the AI question for that. It's a great conversation. We'll see how much time we have to talk about that. So when you build a website, every website has a theme, a skin, a template. They all mean the same thing. For those just by way of definition, the theme is what determines what the site looks like on the front end to the visitor. It's the colors, it's the layout, it's where the navigation goes, it's all of those things, it's what it looks like. And so I wanted to talk just quickly about custom pre-built and DIY. Not that you need to be experts on these things, you don't. But I'm a big believer that a business owner needs to have enough information, enough knowledge about every topic of your business to have an intelligent conversation. So that when you talk with somebody, you know whether they're being truthful, what they're saying is realistic, what they're telling you is valid. So my point here is just to educate you on what these are, a little bit about pros and cons, not to get in a deep dive. So DIY, do it yourself. The Wix and the Squarespaces of the world are built for, they market to the business owner. Hey, come build your own website. And yes, you can. They're great because they're quick and they're simple. They're drag and drop. You're not writing code. They're best used if you have little or no budget, or if you're looking for, I just, my business is brand new. I just want to get something up there. It's a reasonable tool for those things. Many times it looks like it was, built by a business owner. And for a first version, that's fine. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, the website is never done. You're going to go through a couple of versions, day-to-day tweaks, and every couple of years, you'll probably rebuild it. So your DIY, the first one, fine. Do a quick one, get it built, get some customers and some revenue, and then build a more professional site later on. Those professional sites are generally built with either a pre-built template or a custom template. A pre-built template is written by somebody who writes templates and then sells them in bulk. They go to a place like Theme Forest and they sell their template to whoever wants to buy it. They're 50, 75, $100. They are inexpensive to buy, which is a nice benefit. The downside, though, is that you have to fit your content into their layout. They have built a site with some content in mind, a bunch of demo content. And so as you take that template and build your site into it, your content kind of has to fit what they're doing. I'll go my house analogy. If you buy a new house and the living room is 15 feet by 20 feet, you've got to fit your furniture into that living room. As a general rule, you can't knock out the walls and make it a bigger room. You can, but that's not why you bought the house. And kind of go by averages. The average is you're not going to do that. So when you buy a house, you buy a house to fit your furniture. So if you're going to buy a pre-built template, buy one that fits the content you have. It'll go much smoother. We do both. We do custom and pre-built, and the ones that go smoothly are where the content fits really, really well. Rule of thumb that I use when talking about pre-builts: if you think that pre-built looks good and you can use it with 90 or 95% being unchanged, that's a good template. If you look at it and go, yeah, I like it, but I want to change. I want to change this. I want to move that around, and I don't like that there. I want to move this. That's the wrong template. Customs are just like they sound, just like it sounds. It is somebody who's building you a custom template to fit your content. And that's the big difference. They take your content. Okay, we want the homepage to look like this. Great. They'll build the template to look like that and accommodate the 4 pictures and the 3 paragraphs of text and the 1 video that you have that you want on the homepage. So yes, it costs a little more. Yes, it takes a little bit longer, but that's the benefit of a custom. You don't have to compromise your content to fit a pre-built template. So that's a little background on what those are. Domain name and hosting, we're kind of finding a place for this. It originally was at the end, and it's too late to have that conversation. Early on, you have to decide your domain name, like Richard asked about, and the hosting. You should. I know it's bad etiquette to tell people what to do, and I'm going to break that rule. I'm going to tell you 2 things to do. Own your domain name. There are vendors out there who will build your website, and they will buy the domain and they will buy the hosting, and you don't own it. It's a horrible way to get in business. You have to own what is yours. Own the domain name, own the hosting. You can absolutely have a conversation with your vendor. Hey, do you recommend any specific host? Where can it be hosted? Great, have that conversation. But when it comes time to launch your site, you own the domain, you own the hosting. Very important points. I have talked with, over the years, clients who have not owned one or both. Had a nice lady, I think she was in Geneva, owned a candy business. She could not access her website, didn't know how, didn't know who owned it. The developer who built it, she had lost contact with, couldn't make any changes to it. So she's on the verge. One day it will stop working and she'll get out of business website-wise. So own those things.
We have another question in. I'm not sure if you want to tackle this now, but it's how do customers find websites? How do you get to the top of that searches without paying Google? So it might go into more of the search thing, but I just wanted to let you know that came in.
Yeah, I see that there. We'll address it. It's a great question. Obviously, you want people to find your website once you build it. It's kind of the whole point. Let me address it back with the AI, because the AI and SEO kind of one topic. We'll try and get some of those things answered for you. But thanks for asking. So what we've talked about all along, without using the words, is we're building a scope of work. A scope of work is a document, detailed document that defines everything within the website design project. Everything you want out of the website should be in the scope of work. Who you are and what's your brand, what's your goal and how you're going to track it. the assets you'll provide. Are you bringing the branding and the content, or with the vendor you're working with? Do they need to help you define some of that stuff? SEO and marketing needs. What do you want out of the website once it launches? And should there be any third-party integrations? This is more common with e-commerce sites. If you're using a warehouse, does your website have to talk to the warehouse? Does the warehouse need to talk to your website and update with tracking numbers when it ships? All of these things that are going on needed to be defined in the scope of work, because going back to that design with the end in mind, when this thing is all done and your site launches, your vendor goes, great, here's your website, I want my check now. You both have to have a way to go back and go, okay, was the job done? Was it complete and successful and correct? And you're going to refer back to the scope of work. If it was in the scope of work and it wasn't done, then you should be correct in saying, hey, this piece wasn't done. If you go back and go, hey, you know what, it doesn't talk to my warehouse, and that wasn't in the scope of work, then that's your oversight. You've got to put everything in there that you need at the end to be defined. So how do you know if you're on the, so if you go out to a domain registrar, and there are lots of them, we use, I think Namecheap is the company we use, not a referral, but just a statement of fact, we use them. You go out and buy the domain. You can search and own the domains that you want. For the hosting, that's a little bit longer question, but talk with the vendor, or we can talk at the end about what a hosting account is, what's that means, how do you get one? I'll be happy to talk about that if we have some time at the end. So you got your scope of work. Great. So now what? So where do you find candidates to possibly build the brand new fabulous website? First kind of question you're going to ask is where? Are you going to look local? Local is obviously the most limited pool of candidates. But if you want someone who you can sit down face to face, and I'm not talking about Zoom, because yes, it's a lovely tool, but for some things it doesn't do the job. If you want to sit face to face with your vendor, you've got to go local. Find somebody that you can drive to or they can drive to you. National, obviously a much bigger pool of candidates. For the most part, similar languages, similar time zones, not any big differences, and a much larger pool. And obviously Zoom and other video conferencing tools, you can cover a lot of what we used to do face-to-face through one of these things, like these webinars. And then the third is international. Obviously a huge pool of candidates. You will find much lower costs when going international. Third world countries have lower cost of living, so they have lower rates. But you will deal with the issues. The adage of you get what you pay for is absolutely true here. You're paying a lower cost, but you're paying that because you're going to deal with time zone differences. You're going to deal with language barriers. If you speak with them, they may have a really heavy accent. If you communicate back and forth via email, maybe some broken English. We deal with that. It happens. The concerns, obviously, that creates a little bit of an obstacle. But the thing you really want to be aware of is it's so bad that it creates a miscommunication. Hey, I asked for XYZ and they gave me ABC because they didn't understand what I meant, or vice versa. So that's a consideration. There are no right and wrong answers. It's a consideration. If you go internationally, you got to deal with that. India is 12 hours away from us. So, noon here is midnight there. You're going to have these odd communication schedules. I see the question about the hosting. We'll come back to that. So you have your scope of work. That's what you're going to share with all of these potential vendors. Is, hey, here's my scope of work. What do you think? What questions you have? How long will it take? How much will it cost? As I mentioned before about building site, ask colleagues. If you know people who own businesses or work for businesses that have websites, which are most businesses, ask them, where did you go? How did you find them? Where did you learn about them? What would you do differently? Nothing wrong with asking people who have gone through the process before. Chambers of commerce. I live in Wheaton. I can go to the Wheaton Chamber of Commerce and look up on their website. They have a list of members. Some of their members do website development, or they do branding, or they do marketing. I can see who's on their list. But don't just think local. Naperville Chamber of Commerce, for those of you who are local, is a much larger chamber than mine is. There'd be more vendors on that list. Or I can go to one in New York or California or wherever. It doesn't matter. It's a source to look for website vendors. There are freelance websites. Upwork and Freelancer are very useful tools. You can go there, you can create a profile for your company, and you can view the hundreds of profiles of other companies who provide all kinds of work. Certainly, we're talking about website development, but you'll find just about everything there. You can read their description. You can read the reviews. You can see how long they've been there, how many hours they have worked or dollars they have billed. It's a nice tool because they also play kind of this third party intermediary. So you're not dealing directly with the company. Well, you are, but you're going through the freelance site because you're going to spend a chunk of money with a company you've never worked with before. So there's always this uneasiness, which honestly comes both ways. You feel uncomfortable, giving them your money, and the vendor is going to be a little uncomfortable doing work with somebody who they don't know if they're going to pay or not. So the freelance sites do provide a nice benefit. They take a piece of the pie, of course, but they get you get what you pay for. It's a nice option to consider. And post on social media. If you've got a Facebook page or a LinkedIn page or whatever, you say, hey, we're looking to rebuild our website. Here it is. We're looking for some vendors. If you think you can do something for us, reach out and share the scope of work with them. You're trying to get a pool of applicants that you can then shortlist. So the shortlist you're going to get, depending on how long you wait or how long you keep the proposals open and how many places you post them, you may get hundreds of proposals. A lot of them will be very spammy. They will be cover letters that clearly have been copy and pasted. They have not read your proposal. They just copy and paste and apply to as many as they can. You can throw those right at the bottom of the proposals. But as you look through all the applicants and you've knocked off the easy ones, go look at their website. Does it look like it was professionally done? And so the one comment that I'll share here about looking at somebody else's website is it's a natural tendency for you as a business owner to look at it and go, well, that's not the type of website I want. I don't like that color. That's fine. But remember that website wasn't built for you. It was built for them to reach out to their prospects. So don't judge it whether you like it or not. Judge it whether it looks professional. Does it look like it's accomplishing their goal? Because that's why it was built. So a little bit of a back-end tidbit on that one. Do they have third-party reviews? It's easy. If you go to a website and you see a couple of reviews posted on the site or a couple of testimonials that are text on the page, the skeptical side of me goes, I could have loaded that review myself as the business owner. So there's no way to really validate if it's on their site, whether it's true or not. You'd like to believe it is, but we know it doesn't always happen that way. So a third-party review is a Google review, or I keep forgetting that there's another company that does reviews. I can't think of their name right now, but they do those as well. Is a third-party service. And just as another example, on our site, we post our Google reviews. They're really hard to fake. Yes, you can. You can fake anything in this world, but to fake in volume is really difficult. And yeah, there's going to be probably some skewed ones in there. But if there's a bunch or they're all pretty consistent, or if you read through them and they sound legit, when I get reviews and somebody puts a typo in there or bad grammar, I leave it. It's authentic. If you read that, then he probably didn't fake that. He wouldn't have faked a typo. He would have typed it right. You're right. I wouldn't have if I faked it. So I leave those in there. Pick up the phone or send them an email. Just ask a quick question. Hey, what are your hours and where are you? See if they respond. See if they sound like they're happy to talk to you. I know I have. I assume everyone has. You sometimes talk to somebody and you feel like you're bothering them, like you've inconvenienced them. Well, if that's their response, then what's it like to do business with them? So do these kind of little touchy-feely things. See what you get back from all these candidates and come up with a short list. Once you get your short list, now it's time to really dive in, and you're going to need to have a short list. You're not going to want to go through a lengthy interview process with 15 vendors. Depend upon the size of your team, 3, 5, something like that, probably for your short list. And when you talk to them, find out what kind of work they specialize in. Website development is a very broad category. It's like saying, I build houses. Well, do you build $100,000 houses or do you build $5 million houses? Whole different skill set in those things. Same thing with websites. If you're looking for an e-commerce website, look for somebody who does e-commerce. They are unique. Do they provide ongoing support after the site is built? Are they going to hand it off to you and shake your hand and wish you good luck? Or do they want to stay and help? There are companies on both sides of that coin. And there isn't a right answer, but know the answer. You don't want to build it and, okay, great, we need a change. You go, yeah, we don't do that. You don't want to be left hanging if that's not what they do and that's what you want. What platforms they develop on? Do they build on WordPress? Do they build on Shopify? Do they build on BigCommerce? You don't need to be experts in those things, but ask what they're building on And maybe ask why. Why would you build our website on a WordPress? Why is that a good fit for us? The thing you want to kind of look for is developers, myself included, we have personal favorites. If I build on WordPress a lot because we build on it a lot. It's very natural and familiar to me. We have worked with clients over the years, and I can think of one specifically who emailed us one day and said, "Hey, we are moving from Zencart to BigCommerce." And I said, "Well, why?" Now, we had been the website developer for a couple of years. We were not part of the conversation. So it kind of, well, why are you switching platforms without discussing that, or at least sharing it with your website development team? Our marketing guy recommended it, which means the marketing guy is more comfortable with BigCommerce than Zencart. He knows how to work on it better. So that's great to consider, but understand when somebody says, I'm going to build your site on XYZ, why? Is it for your benefit or for theirs? Ask for examples of their work. Go look at some of the websites they had built. And I'll share that caution earlier because I hear this from prospects occasionally. Hey, I looked at that site, but we don't want a green website. Well, that's wonderful. We didn't build their website for you. We built it for them. They wanted green. So when you look at them through the eyes of that business owner. Does it look like that website was professionally built? Does it look like it's accomplishing what is probably their goal? Judge it from their eyes, not from yours. Ask for references. They can be tricky, but ask for them. There may be some vendors who have references and some don't. A little bit of the same caution. Understand that references are difficult. We do have a very short list of references, but it's a huge inconvenience for those customers of ours to take phone calls from random people asking questions. There's no benefit to them. They're taking time out of their day to help us, and it doesn't help them. So I'd say ask for them, but if they don't have any, understand that that's kind of a big ask for some companies and some vendors. How do they handle a change in scope? I can promise you during the build, something's going to change. You're going to change your mind. The vendor's going to go, hey, this didn't work out the way that we thought it might. Here's a couple of options. Something is going to change. How do they handle that? Is there a process? What is the process? And I'll mention the rate, whether they're flat rate or hourly. Again, no right answer, but if you have built out your scope of work, you said, here, this is what we want. And the vendor says, great, we can build it for you in 8 weeks. It'll be $4,000. And you get halfway through and you go, hey, you know what? We need to change this piece of the website. We don't want one page here. This concept needs to be 3, and we need to integrate with our warehouse. If you change the scope, it's going to change the cost. So you're going to need to have that conversation again with the vendor. Go, okay, we need to change this. What does that mean for cost and time frame? Because if you're going to change the scope, it's only fair for them to allow it to have that change and build because you've changed the scope of the work. So just keep that in mind. I'll say it again to kind of be clear about what you need from them. That scope of work it's your little Bible of what the project is. You're always going to be referring back to it. You and they will refer back to that document through the entire process because that's the goal, is that scope of work. You'll pick your winner. Go through, you sit down after you've gone through all these interviews and decide, well, who kind of rose to the top? Who was the best? And it's not as simple as picking at, we had 15 questions and this guy had 14 of them right. Well, that may be great, but the 15th may have been the most important question. So in all these questions you ask, you have to prioritize which ones are really the really most important ones and which ones are really, really nice haves. When I talk with prospects and clients, I always ask them to put together 2 lists. You put together a list of the things I absolutely have to have. The website needs to do this, or it's a deal breaker. I get e-commerce. It's a bad example, but it's really simple to understand. I have an e-commerce website. If I can't place an order on the website, it doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter the SEO. It doesn't matter how pretty the pictures are. If I can't place an order, that's a deal breaker. And then the things I'd like to have. I wish you would have live video. I'd love to have a slider on the homepage where people can submit testimonials. Those may be great things, but they're not deal breakers. So those may be negotiable. So understand in that list of questions which ones are deal breakers and which are not. And I'm a fan of gut feeling. Don't discount that. If somebody just gives you the wrong, have a weird feeling, there's a reason for that. Our little brains do all kinds of weird things that we don't really understand. That's one of them. You get these kind of feelings about people. So don't discount it. Use that. So the site built. So you've got all through the process, you got your scope of work, you pick your vendor. So now what? So find a way and talk with the vendor about how you're going to monitor the build process. They may ask for all your content up front. It does make the build a whole lot easier. You can build it with placeholder stuff. placeholder images, placeholder text, then you're going back and swapping it out. It's a little bit of double work. So they may ask for that up front. Just be aware of that. Will you have access to the site during the build process? Can you see the work in process? Or will they just say, here, it's done, here you go? No right or wrong answer. Understand what the process is like and be sure that you're comfortable with that process. Are there any feedback or review steps? Will they go, hey, we've built out the homepage. We want to pause for a second, get your feedback, make sure, still what you think you want. May or may not do that. There may be milestone payments. Hey, we built out 50% of the site, 50% of the payment is due, and we're going to, pause until we receive payment. Some people do that, some don't. I touched on it before, but change in scope of work. If there's a change, what does that look like? If you have a fixed price, it's probably going to result in these change orders and requoting and reapproving. It's a little bit of a back and forth. If you do hourly, that's a little bit more flexible because there is no need to reevaluate it. Maybe, hey, we want to add a testimonial slide at the homepage. Hey, great, that's going to add an hour and a half of work. You okay with that? Yep, we're okay. Keep on going. Pluses and minuses to both ways to go about it. And while you're going through the build, test everything you can. As you get into the site that's being built, if there's contact forms, fill them out. If it's e-commerce, place a test order. Whatever you have on the site, make sure it works. You're going to want to find all of this stuff, or at least everything you can, before the site goes live. You will test again when it goes live, but you'd rather have that be a really short list because there's some things you can't test until the site goes live. But everything else you can, test it ahead of time. Everyone will be happier. You and the vendor will be happier to iron out these problems before you're going live. So post-site. So the site's done, the site has been launched. It kind of goes back to one of the questions, do they provide ongoing support? If they don't, then this becomes irrelevant. You need to find somebody who does. But for that person, or if the vendor does, who's going to make the content changes and updates? When you add a new staff member, who puts their picture and their bio up on the website? When you have a blog post, who puts that up there? Is that the vendor? Is that you? Will they train your staff person to do those things? Ask these questions. Who's responsible for platform updates? Whatever platform you're built on, whether it be WordPress or Shopify or Wix, understand who's responsible for updating the platform. Platform updates, as well as plugin and theme updates, are really important. One of the most common ways for websites to get hacked into is because something is outdated, an old theme, an old plugin, an old platform. The way that the software world works is the authors will, they're continually updating their plugins or themes or platforms, whatever it is. Sometimes that's new features, sometimes it's bug fixes. But what happens, and this sounds like a scary story, and it is, but it's not meant to be a scary story, is just how updates are managed. If there's a bug fix, the author will release a new version, say, hey, there's a new version out, there's some bugs in the old one, please update. And then sometime later, 30, 60 days, they'll do what's called a full disclosure. They'll go, hey, the version 1.2 of my plugin had this bug. This was the line of code that was the problem. This is how you exploited it, and this is how I fixed it. Those are instructions for hacking into old websites. And that's why old versions are so commonly hacked into, because these instructions are put out in the world for everybody to find. So whatever platform you're on, talk with the vendor before you launch. Who's updating it and how's that process work? Uptime monitoring, make sure the site is up. I mean, it sounds like a simple thing, but I had a client once emailed, said, hey, our website's down, can't place orders. Can you take a look at it? Took a look at it. It had been that way for 4 months. Now, it was a hobby business. It was not, a day-to-day kind of full-time job. But know whether your site's up or not. Make sure it's working. Does the contact form work? Is checkout still working? Updates happen, and sometimes updates break sites. We live in an imperfect world. Understand who's responsible and make sure they know they're responsible. And I talked about, testing as much as you can. The one thing that's hard to test on the development side is tracking the analytics. The Google Analytics won't work. Tracking site conversions or contact form submissions is tricky on a development site. You can make sure they work, but the tracking. So once you go live, make sure those metrics are working. Go through and place an order, fill out the contact form, and make sure that shows up in your tracking so that when you go in 30 days, 60 days later, and you look at the metrics, that if it says 0, it's not because it's broke, it's because nobody did it. Track those things, make sure they're working. So we talked about a lot of things. We do have time for some questions, so I will cover those. But we talked about defining your needs, the scope of work. What's your desired outcome? Do you have your branding? Who's going to create the content? What are your SEO and marketing expectations and needs? If you're finding candidates, will you find them local, national, international? Tips for the interview process. What do you ask them? Or kind of the questions to think about in interviewing and whittling down that list to your short list of 3 or 4. The building and review process, how to partner with your developer through development so that you know that it goes according to plan before it's done. They go, hey, it's done. Yeah, that's all wrong. We should have had a conversation 4 weeks ago. Be a partner in the development. And then the review and launch, make sure it's up and launching and everything works. And this is me and my company. So I'll leave this up here. Let me get back to, so think about some questions. Be happy that we got some time for those. But the question about AI and somebody, I'm going to take the second one first about how do you come to the top of Google and people find your site. It's an interesting and complex topic. It used to be, as most things are in this world, it was much easier 10 or 15 years ago. The way that it works in general is I'll use Google and the search engines interchangeably. Google is certainly the big one. They all essentially work in similar ways. So our conversation, we're going to say they're all the same. But the search engines, they crawl your site. They go out and they know your site exists because you've told them. You'll fill out a Bing and Google both have what they call search consoles. You fill a little profile, you tell them your website, you give them the URL, and you say, hey, here's my URL, here's my sitemap, go crawl my site. And so they will crawl your site. They have to crawl the site, then they have to index your site, and then they'll show up in search results. So those 3 things happen. They have to crawl it and index it for that to happen. They will do that, and in doing so, they will try to understand what every page on your website is about. When they understand what it's about, then they can show it up in search results. So if somebody searches for what your page is about, it could potentially show up as a search result. Now, that's how it works. There are hundreds, thousands of other web pages that may be applicable to whatever it is somebody searched for, and your site is one of them. So where do you come up in the ranking? That's the billion-dollar question. Google determines that. Bing determines that. They don't say what the rules are. And so they do have a list of recommendations. They have rules to follow. But the interesting thing is about 2 weeks ago, Google made a huge mistake and publicly published some internal documents that talked about how they rank. And 2 interesting things came out of that. One was it confirmed some of the things they had been saying. They had been saying, do this. And the document said, yep, that's how we rank. Do this. Yep, that's how we rank. Some of it was contradictory. That Google would say, do this. And Google would say, we don't do this. And in fact, they do. So my lesson from there is take whatever Google says about how to manage your website with a grain of salt. Understand that they can't reveal the secrets of their algorithm, because then people like me, the bad people who are like me, would just build to the rules. They go, if you rank based upon ABC, I'm going to do ABC. Screw the usability. Don't care what it looks like. I'm just going to build this page to rank well. And that's not what Google wants. Google has always wanted to have a good user experience for their searchers. And so what does that mean? It means if I go to Google and I search for tennis rackets, and I find a tennis racket, I find a website that talks about tennis rackets, and it's easy to use, and I like the site, and I found what I wanted, and I bought a tennis racket. That was a good experience for me. Next time I want something, I'm going back to Google. That's what Google wants. They want me to come back. They don't care about you and your tennis racket, but they want a good experience. So they want to rank sites that give people good experiences. So if you focus on that, focus on building a good website that has a good user experience, Google will find a way to rank you well. That's what I have done for 20 years. The rules have changed many, many times. I have never followed the rules specifically. I don't build to the rules. I follow them. I don't build to the rules. That's getting harder and harder because what's happening is AI is getting into this. If you look at the Google search results page, it used to be that they'd have 10 organic pages, 10 organic websites on the search results page. And then they added 3 paid results at the top. And then there was, a couple of paid results down the side. Now, if you go, there are products across the top. There are videos. There might be a company profile. If you search for our company, you may find our company profile there. Somewhere on that page are buried probably 3 organic results. So even if you rank well, you're now buried in all this other content. And I'll make it even worse for you. AI is making this even harder for websites. If you go to Google nowadays, and I'll talk about AI specifically in a second, but you go there, they try and answer your question on the results page. So if you ask for, what's the best recipe for sloppy joes, they're going to give you a recipe for sloppy joes. You are not going to go to recipes.com to see the recipe, to see their ads, to click their links to buy products at your local Jewel that they get an affiliate commission on. You're not leaving Google because that's what Google wants. They want to keep you on the Google page in the Google ecosphere and not send you someplace else. So if they can, they will answer the question. And so to answer the question about AI, that's where AI is going. AI is trying to not intentionally, but AI is making the search results page irrelevant. I have in the past several weeks, I will go to one of the AI tools. I happen to like Perplexity a lot. I will go there and stuff I would normally Google. I will go there and ask, hey, where can I find this? Hey, what's the answer to this question? And they give me the answer. I don't ever go to a website anymore. So if you're selling a product, you probably still need to go to the website in some form or fashion to buy. But if you're doing how-tos or information, it's going to change dramatically in the next 6 or 12 months, or maybe 4 weeks. Who knows how fast this stuff goes? But it's a huge change in online marketing and search results. And long kind of answer to your question, but it's making a big difference. I will go back to, though, if you build a website that has good content and a good user experience, that's still what everybody wants. How they get that is going to change, but that hasn't changed in my 26 years online. That's still the bottom line. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to read through and see some of the questions here in the chat here as well.
Yeah, I marked everything with red, which will add some kind of follow-up, and then I can click it off when it's done.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got you. I was looking for the red. So the AI can find customers. Well, how do you know if you own the domain name and the hosting? You'll know you own it if you bought it. If you didn't buy a domain name and you didn't buy a hosting account, then you don't own it. Domain name, you can go to a domain registrar. I happen to like Namecheap. There are others that you can use, but if you go out and I think like Richard said, go and search for a domain name and buy it, they're 12, 15 bucks a year, something like that. They're not expensive, but buy your own. You can do that at any point in this process. For the hosting, you probably want to have a conversation with the developer. There are a lot of hosting companies. There are some good ones and there are some bad ones. I got in trouble with speaking poorly last time, so I will keep my mouth shut. But talk to your vendor. They will have some experience in hosting companies and get their input. But when it comes time, tell them, hey, I want to buy it. We'll discuss it with you on who you think might be best. Go do your research on them, and then when it comes time, you buy the hosting account. Reason being is if you part ways with that vendor at some point, either because you just haven't needed them and talking with them, they go out of business, you pissed them off and they don't want to talk to you anymore. If you don't own the hosting account, you're in some really bad situations. So own those two things. That's why. Okay, quite about hosting. You touched on pros and cons of platforms, Wix, Squarespace, WordPress. Yeah, so Vince, I'm not sure what your question is here. If you want to either clarify or hop in, unmute, feel free. And then while you're doing it, so I Karen, your question about hosting. So hosting, I did a webinar on this maybe a year or two ago. If you have a website, your website files and folders need to exist on a computer. It's called a web server because that's the specific kind of computer it is. It's just a fancy home computer. It has the same things your home computer has. It's just got to plug the internet on it. It needs to sit someplace. And so that needs to sit in a data center owned by a hosting company. So a hosting company is just somebody who has the files and folders for your website that they sit on. Their responsibility is primarily to make sure that server is up and running. They're not going to update your WordPress site. They're not going to generally fix software problems that break on your site. Their job is to make sure the server is up and running, not support your website. There are a couple of exceptions, but by far the rule. So that's kind of what they do. Everybody, if you have a website, everybody has a hosting company. And you earn the domain outright without having to keep paying every year. No, you cannot. I'm sorry, I stumbled. Can you ever own the domain name without outright without having to keep paying for it every year? No, we talk about buying a domain name, but in reality, you're renting it. You own it for as long as you pay for it. And once you stop paying for it, it will eventually expire. And once it expires, after sometimes they keep it for 30 or 60 days past the expiration to allow you to renew if you forgot or something payment broke or something like that. Eventually, it goes back out into the pool of websites available, and somebody else can buy that domain name. So if you own it, make sure you renew it every year, or you can sometimes buy it for 2 or 3 or 5 years. But if it expires, you absolutely can lose it. And if it expires, it goes through the proper expiration and timeframes, and you just missed it, and somebody else buys it, you don't have any legal recourse to it. If it's in between and somebody steals it, whole different conversation. But yeah, you want to keep paying that and own it for as long as you're in business.
Is that true if you do a company, do it like a whole branding company name, so you change your whole name and you actually just start a whole new website? Should you still own your old name for how long?
So in a case like that, if you do a rebranding and change your company name, what I would do is I would keep the old domain name and redirect it to the new website. So if anybody had a bookmark or kept an email from 5 years ago with your link into it and to your old domain name, you want them to go to the new one. So I would actually keep the old one. We did. So the company invitation business that I owned was Custom Creations Unlimited, and I still own those domain names. At the time, I bought the .com, I bought the .net, I bought the .org. I did custom dash creations dash unlimited. I only used the one for the website, but I bought those because they were 12 bucks a year. And I didn't want somebody else to buy those domains and create confusion or try and steal traffic from me. So I bought them as a defensive move rather than using them for anything. It's something to consider. If you end up you building your business really big and you own the .net, and now a competitor comes in and owns the same name with the .com, got a bit of a problem. People assume .com. If they're going to type in a URL, they're going to add the .com on the end. It's just the way everybody thinks. So you may want to consider some alternative names as a defensive move. Don't go crazy. You don't need to own hundreds of them. But if there's some really similar ones, maybe consider doing that. I don't know, Vince, if you're still on it, I don't know if you want to clarify that question. If you're still on, if you want to, great. If not, then happy to take any others.
You may not be able to expand
Yeah.
on that. Did you
Yeah.
want to go back to the AI stuff with SEO, or did we cover that enough?
Yeah, I don't know. Any additional questions? It's a huge topic and happy to share my thoughts on it, but I don't know if there's any follow-up questions or aspects of that anybody would like to know or clarify.
Richard, were all your questions answered regarding that, or do you still have a few more questions about it?
No, I think at this point, all my questions are answered. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Yeah, so I know Barbara mentioned it, but I'll send her my slides and it needs to be sent out probably tomorrow, but they'll be sent out so you'll have all these and feel free to reach out with questions or anything else afterwards as well.
Yeah. Is there anybody who, you're welcome to come off of mute if you had a question we didn't cover, but I think we covered them all.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
On my website, I get a lot of people, I want to say fishers, or they're fishing on my contact page, and they're asking or they're telling me that I'm leaving money on the table for marketing fees. So I'm like, okay, so you're calling me to tell me that there's something wrong with my website and that you can help me, but I'm getting tons of that. So what are these people doing? Are they looking for work? Or do I have a messed up website that they're contacting me? Am I on the radar for them? Because I'm getting more than one person, and it's kind of making me nervous that something's wrong with my website.
Yeah, so it's a good question, Karen. So what you are getting are called spam or bot submissions.
Okay.
98% of those have never visited your website, and there's no truth to it all. They write a script, a bot, that goes out and looks for contact forms on websites. And when it finds one, it fills it out. I get emails every week saying, hey, would you like to redesign your website? We're a website design company. Nobody would come to our website and legitimately sending me emails saying, we'd like to redesign your website. We get the same ones as well. We found errors. Would you like a report? They are spam, and there's no truth to them. There's nothing wrong with having somebody actually look at your website, but if there's something probably wrong, you can probably figure it out. Go through, and clearly the contact forms are working. So great. Our page is broken. Well, if they load, then great. Do they load pretty quickly? Most of the stuff in terms of a website evaluation or a simple perspective, you can do on your own. Make sure it's working. And it's something you should do on a regular basis. Things do break, and you don't want to have a customer go, hey, I tried to get your website and it didn't work. But don't worry about those. If you're getting a lot of them, I would suggest putting, it's called a CAPTCHA, computer aided programming test, to tell humans and computers apart. I forget what it stands for these days. Google has them. It's that checkbox. I am not a robot. It prevents most bots from filling it out. There are versions. The Google one, the version 3, is called an invisible one. There is no checkbox, because that checkbox can kind of be annoying when you get those 9 pictures, pick all the stairs. It's a pain. But if you do that, it will reduce the spam submissions that you're getting. They're not causing any problem. They're not hacking in. It's just an inconvenience to get 10 of these emails and go delete, 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 delete. So you may want to have that installed for a convenience factor, but don't be worried about hacking or anything. They're annoying and not much more than that.
Okay, I just thought maybe there's something that I'm missing,
No, it's a good point. I get emails from our clients, but hey, I got this email from somebody. Can you take a look at it? Like, no, there's nothing wrong with your site. It's spam. Don't waste your time reading the
good.
email and forwarding it to me. Yeah, yeah. Everybody, if you have a website, if you have an email address, you're gonna. If you haven't got one, you will. But yeah, don't worry about them. They're nothing to be concerned about. I saw Vince followed. So can you tell pros and cons of WordPress, Wix, and Squarespace? I need a quick overview. So Wix and Squarespace are more similar than the others. They're called software as a service. They do the hosting. They are marketed for business owners. Hey, come build your own website. You can do it. And you can. They're drag and drop. They're very, very easy to use. As with anything that's very easy, it's also a little bit simple. So you're probably not going to build a really complex website on there. May not need one. As I mentioned during the presentation, if it's you just started the business and you don't have a website, you need one. Not a bad alternative. You can get something up there that people can visit and see you're in business and read about what you do and have a contact form and save your money for a more professional website when you've got some customers and some revenue. WordPress is WordPress is in a good way a behemoth. Last I saw, they power something like 43% of the world's websites. And it sounds like a big number. It is. I think number 2 is somewhere like 8 or 9%. So they are head and shoulders and toes and ears above everybody else. It's a great platform to build on. It's very versatile. So from my perspective as a developer, we can do all kinds of stuff on a WordPress. And there's all kinds of plugins and themes and extra add-ons that we can use to extend the functionality. The type of business you have may or may not factor into the platform. If you're doing an e-commerce business, then yes, you want an e-commerce platform. So that's a necessity. Outside of that, there isn't a hard and fast rule. It will come down to a little bit of functionality, a little bit of developer skill set or talent. We don't build on Wix and Squarespace. So if you came to us, it's not something we're going to offer you. It's a conversation to have with the developer, but I hope that kind of answers the question, gives a little bit of insight into.
Do you work as a score mentor?
Technically, no. I'm not a mentor. I have been a mentee over and over for 25 years. I have come and gone as I need stuff. I have sat down with local score counselors. I have had some counselors that are across the country. One of the guys I had was in Ohio, I remember. So I use them a lot, but when I retire and have extra time, I probably will, but I don't have time in my schedule to run this and do counseling.
Do you do short-term advising paid? Is it paid consult?
Yes, if you have questions, yes, my email address is still on the screen. Shoot me an email, and absolutely we can arrange something. I will happy to have a chat with you.
I didn't see it posted in any of the chats here. Maybe it was.
It's on the screen. I can post it in the chat if I can type.
Oh, okay.
The same
Sorry.
time, but
okay.
No, that's fine. But yeah, it's on the.
Oh, yes. I see it here.
I'm There you
And
go.
when I send out the
Yeah.
recording, it'll have Jim's email and his contact information as well tomorrow. You'll get that email later in the afternoon tomorrow, once
Thank
all
you.
the recording stuff is done and we've, done our edits and stuff. So I'll send that out
Okay.
tomorrow. You'll have Jim's information. You can reach out to him. He's
Yeah, yeah,
he's
Thank
yeah,
you very
please
much.
do.
a great guy.
You're
I
welcome.
reached out to him once and then I hooked on him for a presenter.
And
I said, you need to come back and start presenting to us. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
we have
So setting
one.
up a business, setting up a business and estimating startup costs. Is there a range or average website setup cost to use for general planning? I realize it will vary based upon scope of work. So, yes, when somebody says how much does a website cost, $500 to $10,000. It really depends upon the functionality, and what I mean by that is what will the website do? If it's 3 pages and a contact form, that's not complicated. If it's an e-commerce site where you're shipping stuff and you're collecting payments, that's complicated. So functionality, what will it do? That will be a big impact on cost. But I know I said, 500 to 10,000. Our builds as just a data point, typically in the 1,500 to 4,000 range, to give you a ballpark. Certainly lots of variables, lots of conversations to have, but there's a number to play with. Do I help nonprofit organizations? Yes, I volunteer with, I think about 4 of them right now, and we courtesy host websites for about 6 or 8 nonprofits. So yes, I love nonprofits. I do a lot of work with some dog rescues, but I own 2 Goldens, so I have a thing for golden retrievers. But yes, we help nonprofits.
Well, thank you all for your participation. I'm gonna end the session now because we're a little bit over time. But thank you so much for all attending and being interactive. And Jim appreciates that, and we appreciate that as well. Jim, thank you so much for presenting this topic. And
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I will I'll send out again an email tomorrow. We'll have Jim's information. We'll have the slides on it, so you'll have that for reference and link to the recording. So everybody have a great evening. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Barbara.
You bet. Thank you, guys.